Impactful transfers in college football. We're also going to go through the latest recruiting news. This is live here on Bash's CFB show. Let's get into it.
Here's Edwards with the lead. Donovan Edwards down the sideline. Gets past Ransom. Donovan Edwards. Touchdown, Michigan. The stop.
The play action. Bennett looks down the middle. McConkey's wide open. Touchdown, Dogs.
How are we doing, everybody? Thank you guys for tuning in here. I'm going to try to get a couple of these out per week in podcast form and video form. And I also just edited and posted a clip giving you guys a spring update with what's going on in Georgia in the coming days, maybe even tomorrow, maybe even tonight. We're going to have Alabama come out. We're going to have my Ohio State Buckeyes come out at least, once every time I give you guys some sort of practice updates with teams, because every single time, as long as there's something new, which there will be with Ohio State, I'm going to be covering Ohio State. That's my team. It's the one I know best. And it'd be a disservice for me to not give you guys what I know best. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, because what I am doing here is going to be super impactful to the Loudmouth brand. And it is also going to be super impactful to, honestly, just my experience trying to work on this path. So without further ado, we're going to talk about 15 impactful transfers. Now, I'm not going to talk about quarterbacks. That's the first thing I want to say. The other thing is my criteria is going to be one per team, but not because there aren't multiple impactful transfers. For example, somebody off this list is a guy like Josiah Stewart at Michigan, an edge rusher. But if there is a more impactful player on that team, as far as transfers, I gotta think that there are 15 or 14 other teams rather that has just as impactful of a transfer on their roster. So every position but quarterback is going to be up for grabs. And we're going to start with CJ Dupree from Maryland. He transfers to Alabama. Now, with the loss of Cameron Latu, Alabama is going to have to replace with a dynamic target. He's a very tall, lengthy, and not exactly a great inline blocker, but I'm not sure if Alabama's really looking for that. But Tommy Rees does like his good receiving tight ends. He was able to use Michael Mayer the last couple of years as the offensive coordinator of Notre Dame. And CJ Dupree's a big target that's going to dominate the middle of the field. And, he was a guy who did cause problems for multiple Big Ten schools. He caused problems for Michigan and Ohio State last year. It caused problems for Penn State a little bit too. This is going to be a huge impact transfer for Alabama to be able to replace Cameron Latu and give their new starter, whether it's Milroe or Simpson, another option in the receiving game. So number 15, CJ Dupree. Number 14, I'm going to go with Dante Cephas. Penn State, he comes in from Kent State. Now, last year, Penn State made a similar move. They got Mitchell Tinsley out of Western Kentucky. Now, Mitchell Tinsley was a number 2 receiver, and he was more of just like a reliable possession receiver. This is a little bit different. Dante Cephas is a more dynamic athlete. He was a do-it-all type of guy at Kent State, and they were able to find success out of Mitchell Tinsley. I thought Tinsley played pretty well last season, and now you got Dante Cephas, who probably is going to work a lot in the slot, take on that Parker Washington role, while Keandre Lambert-Smith tries to step up as a true X wide receiver. It'll be interesting to see how Penn State's offense looks in year one of Drew Aller, but it's certainly important that you get him a big-time guy that is super versatile and can do absolutely anything you ask him to in Dante Cephas. Number 13, I'm going with Tony Grimes from Texas A&M from North Carolina to Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M lost Denver Harris, and their secondary is not super deep. It's probably the least deep part of their entire team. However, bringing in a guy like Tony Grimes, who has starting experience and has played well in the ACC, in fact, was the one non-liability in that North Carolina defense last year, Tony Grimes is going to be able to come in, guard some of the best. He's athletic enough, certainly, to guard some of the best talent that you're going to go up against in the SEC West. And when you stack on top that the SEC West does not have that elite wide receiver talent that they have had in years past, that's what makes this interesting as far as a fit goes for Tony Grimes going to Texas A&M. So he's my number 13, the cornerback from North Carolina going to Texas A&M. Number 12, I'm going to go with Marcellus Johnson. A little bit off the radar here. Missouri, he's from Eastern Michigan, and he started each of the last 2 years at left tackle for Eastern Michigan. Now, Missouri's returning a high volume of their production on defense last year. I believe it's like 84% of their production on defense. So they're going to have a really good defense because that is returning production off of a great defense already last year. Offensively, they were decent when it came to running the ball, but it only came in moments. And they were also decent when it came to passing the ball. Hey, what's up, Cam? Nice to see you, by the way. Nice to see you in the chat. But they were decent when it came to running the ball, and they were decent when it came to passing the ball as well, but they were nothing special. Now, to be able to give whoever the starter is going to be, whether it's Brady Cook coming back again, Jake Garcia shows off that talent and takes that job. Having a left tackle that's an anchor with starting experience and a lot of starting experience, a lot of football under his belt. At the very least, this is an impactful leader, but I think this is going to be huge when it comes to that offensive Missouri kind of being able to click, and specifically in the pass game as Luther Burden goes into year 2. And yes, they lost their number 1 guy. We'll talk about him a little later, but I think this is a huge, huge get in the transfer portal for the Missouri Tigers. Number 11, I'm going with Demoy Kennedy, Colorado from Alabama. Now, Colorado made a lot of moves in the transfer portal. We know how good their transfer portal class is, and we know what Colorado is, essentially going to be made of in 2023. But I think their best chance to honestly make a bowl game is going to rely on how much this defense is going to really improve off of last year's poor performances. I mean, 1-11, you had a really bad defense last year. It'll be interesting for sure to see if Colorado can take that next step defensively or a step up defensively. And you got Travis Hunter coming in. And the reason I didn't put him here is only because everybody knew he was going to follow Dion. So yeah, it's an impactful transfer, but he's coming with Dion. This is a little bit different because it's a true transfer portal situation where Demoy Kennedy can be that leader and that anchor in the middle. And you're talking about, I know he's not exactly going to be ready, but he's going to be really talented and have some moments. Cormani McLean is going to get playing time, and Travis Hunter at the other corner spot. They're at least going to be a lot better off in the back 7, but I think a huge part of it is that man in the middle, Demoy Kennedy, who has some playing time experience, but he was in the 2 deep. He never really cracked the starting lineup at Alabama. That'll be huge. Number 10, and maybe I'm underrating this move a little bit, but Justin Flo going to Arizona from Oregon. Big-time name. We all know him. He was a 5-star kid, edge rusher coming out of high school. But last year, he really took a step down. Now, in 2021, he started to really have a good season. Early on in the season, he dealt with some injury, and then of course, last year, it was just disappointing. He couldn't really stay on the field, but we know his type of talent. Now, if you talk about Jed Fisher's program, what do we know them for? Well, Dorian Singer is a wide receiver that's transferring out to USC. He was able to get that because of electric offense led there by Jaden DeLora. Pardon me. I blanked on the name. Jaden DeLora at quarterback there, and they also have McMillan coming back at wide receiver this year. So even if you lose a guy like Dorian Singer, they still have a lot of wide receiver talent, and they have a lot of offensive talent. Justin Flo being an edge rusher or a linebacker, whatever they decide to use him as, if it can all come together, he can stay healthy, and he can finish and continue his development and look more like the Justin Flo that we did see in college. This isn't just a kid who had hype coming out of high school and hasn't done anything. This team can be really dangerous, and Justin Flo can be a huge part of it. And even Cam is calling Arizona a sleeper. All right, number 9 here. Jaheim Singletary going to Arkansas from Georgia. Now, Arkansas had the worst pass defense in college football last year. Jaheim Singletary is a very, 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 very talented kid who just really couldn't beat out guys like Dalen Everett. He couldn't, crack the rotation last year with Keely Ringo and Kamari Lassiter playing. And now Dalen Everett's going to be the starter, and that was pretty clear. And a little bit of just not the right fit. That's what I'm hearing also from Jaheim Singletary. He's a talented kid. And if he can get things together and they can stay healthy in the back end, because I will remind you, everything started to go south when Jalen Catalon got hurt in the first game of the year. Their safety, their captain, their everything on defense got hurt first game of the year. I thought that defense would be a lot better with Dwight McGlothern out there. Now they're bringing in a talented kid. If they can build off of his skill set and put him in position to succeed, that can drastically improve this Arkansas pass defense to at the very least be middle of the pack and not the Michigan State pass defense of 2021 like they were last year. So number 9, I'm going with Jaheim Singletary. Number 8, I'm going with another Jaheim Bell, Florida State from South Carolina. Now, Jaheim Bell played a little bit of running back, and I'm curious to see if Florida State just says to him, you don't have to worry about doing that, because I'm wondering if that had part to do with Jaheim Bell transferring or not, or if it was just like hey, I want to ride this wave. And it's kind of like a 1A, 2 or 1A, 1B type of situation with Florida State as far as impactful transfer with Fentrell Cypress on the other side. But I mean, I just talking about a dynamic target that can dominate the middle of the field. I think Jaheim Bell definitely fits that mold. I think he's the best tight end transfer in the transfer portal class. You could argue for Eric All, you could argue for CJ Dupree. But regardless, Jaheim Bell is a dynamic athlete who can do a lot of things, and I'm not sure what Florida State's plan with him is. But whatever the kid's comfortable with and whatever Florida State wants him to do, that's going to make a huge impact on this offense and really be that Swiss Army knife that they're really looking for. So number 8, I'm with Jaheim Bell. Number 7, I'm going with Javion Cohen. And out of the 3 transfers from Alabama, Javion Cohen is the most interesting story when it comes to this. It was a lot to do with NIL money, but so it was with Tommy Brockermeyer. So it was with Damian George. And I think Javion Cohen has a potential to be the best out of that 3. And he has a chance to really help out that offense at Miami that really struggled. And Josh Gaddis going over to Maryland now after, that disaster that was at Miami. And maybe a guy like Javion Cohen can help re-spark the fire that was that Jalen Knighton-led run game. Or maybe Tyler Van Dyke can get things back rolling to where they were towards the end of 2021. And a lot of it has to do with offensive line play, and the anchor in the middle could definitely be Javion Cohen. So just a quick touch on there. And number 6, I think personally this is a complete underrated pickup, a Johnny Cornelius from Oregon, or going to Oregon from Rhode Island. I get it. Rhode Island's not exactly the highest level of competition for sure. But when you're talking about Johnny Cornelius, he dominated everybody he was across. He's got all the measurables, and he was pursued. It was a huge transfer decision for him to pick Oregon. He was pursued by big-time programs. I know Ohio State was after him, one of those programs. He's going to be an amazing player, an amazing prospect for the NFL, and he would have been that at Rhode Island. This can just elevate that, and he's got the potential out of all these offensive linemen in this transfer portal. He's got the best chance out of all of them to be a first rounder, especially there at a tackle position. We'll see how that offense is going to be, utilizing him, whether it's going to be on the right side, left side, or whether they might end up moving him inside. I doubt they're going to do that. I think they picked him up to fill a need at tackle. But year 1 without Kenny Dillingham, after Dillingham left, they're going to have to pick it up when it comes to, pass protection and giving Bo Nix time, not making him run for his life. Like at times it felt like he kind of had to. So number 6, Johnny Cornelius. As we enter the top 5, here's number 5. I'm going to go with Adonai Mitchell from Georgia going to Texas. And I think this is a two-sided impact. Number 1, now I don't think Georgia has that dominant X receiver on their roster. Because if you guys remember, A.D. Mitchell, he was hurt most of the year last year, but I had said all year, their best wide receiver is hurt. They're not throwing the ball as effectively because he's hurt. Now, Georgia in the throw game, going to dominate the middle of the field. Again, I'll get back to Georgia in a little bit. They're going to dominate the middle of the field for sure. But that outside really got opened up when you had Adonai Mitchell play against Ohio State, play against TCU. And at the very least, there was a sort of respect that secondaries have to give when Adonai Mitchell is on the field, just like you got to give respect when Arian Smith was on the field as far as deep speed. So the reverse effect on Georgia, somebody now, a younger player now, maybe a less ready player than Adonai Mitchell, and certainly less talented, because a guy like Dylan Bell is not as talented. A guy like Rosemy Jack-Saint, not as talented. So A.D. Mitchell leaves, and that leaves a little bit of a hole in that wide receiver room for Georgia. Again, more on that later. As far as Texas, now you can do a lot of different things with X. Now you can do a lot of different things with Xavier Worthy. Now you can do a lot of different things with Isaiah Nair. And now you can maximize A.D. Mitchell because you don't have to isolate him as the next receiver, because you can isolate X. You can isolate Isaiah Nair. All three of these guys have amazing college football experience playing the game. They're going to have the most dynamic wide receiver core, in my opinion, and that includes Ohio State. I think if you're talking about starting three, I think right now Texas has a better starting three at wide receiver than Ohio State. Ohio State might have the best wide receiver in America in Marvin Harrison Jr., but Xavier Worthy is right on his heels when it comes to that. He's probably number two. And then you got a guy like Isaiah Nair and A.D. Mitchell who are really, really talented. And then you're talking about Ohio State, comparing them. Okay, you have, a Emeka Egbuka, but who's that next one? Is it Julian Fleming? Well, there were times where he didn't impress. Is it Jaden Ballard? Well, he hasn't really done anything yet. Is it Xavier Johnson? I like Xavier Johnson, but he's too much of a Swiss Army knife when it comes to that offense. So, in my opinion, right now as we stand, because of this addition, this makes Texas the strongest wide receiver room, at least at the top end in America. Huge pickup for the Texas Longhorns and a huge loss for Georgia. Number 4, I'm going to go with Ernest Hausman. Now, again, I mentioned at the top of this, you could mention something about Josiah Stewart, but the reason why I highlight Ernest Hausman is because I'm looking at Michael Barrett and Junior Colston, who were kind of liabilities in coverage. It was the one weakness, and certainly TCU's offense was able to expose it in the Fiesta Bowl with those two. You add a linebacker who plays outside, but he can also play inside. He can rush off the edge. He's very versatile in what he can do at the linebacker position. And also, it takes a little bit of that coverage pressure off of Colston and off of Barrett, who are both back. And now this flips the weakness of the defense into probably the strongest point of the defense. Because, of course, you're going to get the development that you're going to get from Michael Barrett and Junior Colson. But then you're also going to bring in an Ernest Hausman who played great at Nebraska, had a great spring this past spring, of course, because it's already concluded for Michigan, and displayed it in the spring game. How Ernest Hausman is really coming along in this Michigan system, it is super exciting if you're a Michigan fan, because like I said, you are turning something that, maybe Michigan fans do or don't know this. But from an outsider's perspective, the one weakness I could point out on that defense is Junior Colson and Michael Barrett weren't great in pass coverage. And now you add in somebody who's very dynamic as an athlete who can definitely do a better job and apply a little bit more pressure for Junior Colson and Michael Barrett to see the field on those nickel positions, because I guarantee you Ernest Hausman is going to be there. Number 3, I'm going with Dasan McCullough, going to Oklahoma from Indiana. Again, we're talking about versatile linebackers. This is another one fitting into that Brent Venables system, probably going to play a very similar role to what Isaiah Simmons did, except I doubt he's going to be put on the islands, but I could really see that type of role in a Brent Venables defense. This guy is really dynamic. He was the everything on this Indiana defense as a freshman, a true freshman. And now he's going over to Oklahoma, where they desperately need somebody like that. Venables now his eyes are just popping and he's just ready to go. And he's super excited to get him out there because it's just that, little toy that he has on his defense that he could just play around with. And he could essentially move him around and do a lot of different things with him. And I'm really excited to see what that looks like. It was one of the biggest, of course, with him being number 3, one of the biggest transfer pickups in the portal. Number 2, I'm going with Davison Igbinosun, going to Ohio State from Ole Miss. Now, a lot of you guys are going to be calling bias here, but can I just give you the case here? Davison Igbinosun coming in, as a freshman, he was all SEC, and he was going up against SEC wide receivers all day. Do you guys remember how depleted that Ohio State cornerback room was last year? They had 6 scholarship corners on the entire roster this last year. And now it's 7, right? But the difference here is a lot of those guys were younger, having to fill in. There was a game against Wisconsin. I was at this game, and I was actually impressed by how they played, but it's Wisconsin, where Jair Brown, a true freshman, and a redshirt freshman, J.K. Johnson, both the 4th and 5th corners on the roster, 4th and 5th on the depth chart, had to start. Denzel Burke, Cameron Brown, and Jordan Hancock were hurt. Now, Denzel Burke, we all know, has NFL potential. But the things that I am starting, and this is higher than it would have been maybe 2 weeks ago, the things that I'm hearing about Davison Igbinosun and how much he is shining on that defense for Ohio State, how many PBUs, he's got a couple of interceptions this spring for sure, but all these PBUs and these plays that he's making, these clips that are coming out, it's always Davison Igbinosun making a play on the ball and having the best technique on the team by far. And most importantly, Davison Igbinosun is not intimidated by the logo of Ohio State and the pressure from the outside. He loves it. He loves to go out and compete. And this kid is working really, really hard to stay on the field and be on the field. And he will be one of Ohio State's starting corners this year. So not only does he add depth to Ohio State, he improves that room significantly. So Ohio State's Davison Igbinosun, transfer from Ole Miss, he's number 2. But my number 1 guy is Dominic Lovett from Missouri going to Georgia. Why would he be number 1? He wasn't an absolutely dominant wide receiver at Missouri. Well, I'm going to say 2 things. A, that pass game that Missouri had was not super dynamic. And B, the thing that I feel like Georgia was missing was a true slot guy last year, when they had A.D. Mitchell on the outside or Rosemary-Jackson on the outside. And you could talk about Ladd McConkey, but frankly, Ladd McConkey is more of a possession receiver than a true slot guy. I mean, he's not a route technician. You could try to racially profile all you want, and I don't even want to get down that path, but he's not like Cooper Kupp, okay? Let's not even go down that route. He's not like Wes Welker. Ladd McConkey is not a route technician. He's got speed. He's very, very quick. And, when you're talking about Dominic Lovett, you can see a lot of Jackson Smith and Jigba type of traits in him when you're talking about a true slot guy. And that's what people are talking about ahead of the draft when it comes to Jackson Smith and Jigba. He can only play in the slot. He's got traits that work really well in the slot. There's a difference between only being able to do that and having traits that fit that. Will Dominic Lovett be able to play outside? Yes. Do I expect him to play outside? Yes. But when Georgia goes 11 personnel and you need to stick somebody in the slot, Dominic Lovett is your guy. And if you can figure out who's going to go opposite Ladd McConkey, because I believe Ladd McConkey should be the Z, if you can find a true X receiver on your roster, like we just talked about A.D. Mitchell, and you're in 11 personnel with Brock Bowers as your tight end, this offense can be really dangerous, and it could be headlined by a 1,000-yard receiving year out of Dominic Lovett. That's all I got as far as transfers go. If you have any other transfers that I did not mention, non-quarterback transfers, because that could be a separate video on its own, top 10 quarterback transfers or top 5 or whatever, let me know if you got any other transfers that I did not mention. I only have two recent commits to really talk about, big time commits. And the first one, I'm going to just go based on, where we ended off. So you have four-star, and the bottom line ticker has both of these, but four-star John Mitchell, a cornerback. He's 6 foot, a buck 77 from Jacksonville, Florida. He's definitely going to have to put on some weight. He's a little bit of a developmental guy, but so are the recent corners that have been through there. Specifically, a guy like Jair Brown in that secondary for them was a junior college player, right? And he had to come in from there. With what they are going to be able to develop, or with how they've been able to develop at defensive back, though, he's going to be a good player. He just needs to put on about 10, 15 pounds of pure muscle, and we'll be all good there. He's a little bit skinny, but overall, he's definitely athletic enough, too. And we also got a four-star running back, top 100 player, fifth best running back in the class is James Peoples. He's going to Ohio State from San Antonio, Texas. Now, personally, the second I heard James Peoples talk, you could just tell he was going to be an Ohio State Buckeye at the end of the day. His family's roots are in Columbus, and he's really got a lot of edge to him when it comes to, trying to be that, next great back at Ohio State. There's a lot of glory when it comes to that for him. And when it comes to him being from Texas, look, like I said, he's got family from up here. He's a military kid. And usually what you get with kids who grew up in a military family where they are because of the military, they don't have loyalty to their home state, especially because as they get closer to this college life and college age, the parents who are in the military are a lot closer to retirement in the military. And from what I hear, his plan is for the family to move back to Ohio once his dad is out of service. So to his dad, thank you for your service, sir. And as a Buckeye fan, I'm really happy to have Mr. James Peoples in the fold, because there is a lot of panic after Jordan Marshall committed to Michigan. And that's a huge get still for Michigan. That's a win for Michigan. But the sky was not falling in Columbus. And I tried to tell people that around Columbus, and it certainly holds true. Just a couple of recruiting battles that I want to look over, and there's nowhere else to look but Mr. Aaron Noland. Now, Aaron Noland got his offer from Ohio State over the weekend, and he knows where he's going to go. And he's committing on Saturday the 8th. Now, what's interesting about Aaron Noland's recruitment is it seems like – so I just want to clarify something to you guys, by the way, since we are talking about Ohio State in this recruitment. The reason why there was no offer for Aaron Noland before is because Ryan Day never saw him throw in person. And a huge part of that – the circumstances and the stipulations that Ryan Day has is for a recruit to receive an offer, Ryan Day wants to see him throw in person. Well, over the weekend, last weekend, he threw in person. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Aaron Noland is committing 1 week after he visited Ohio State in person and threw in front of Ryan Day. To me, it's very clear that Aaron Noland should be an Ohio State Buckeye. Some other teams involved in this, I think Clemson's definitely got a chance here. Miami might have a chance, and Oregon is definitely going to make a play for this. Out of his finalists, I think he had 7. Arkansas, so I mentioned, Miami, Oregon, Clemson. Arkansas was also in that finalist list. And then there were 2 others, Texas A&M, and I thought there was one more, but Alabama. Alabama was listed as a final, which he's not going to Alabama. I think everybody knows that. So definitely an interesting situation going on with Aaron Noland. But overall, I'd be a little bit surprised. And this, again, I know we're talking a lot about Ohio State, but this is not a homer thing right here when I say he's probably going to go to Ohio State given the circumstances that I've heard about. Let's talk about former Ohio State decommitment, Dylan Raiola. Now, it's clearly down to 3 schools. There are crystal balls all over the place at these three schools: Georgia, Nebraska, and USC. Right now, the favorite is Georgia. But I'm hearing he was pretty close with Deuce Robinson, the tight end who just committed to USC. However, he was pretty close with Jeremiah Smith, who's still at Ohio State or committed to Ohio State. And when you're talking about USC's Deuce Robinson, you're talking about the problem with football and baseball there, because he's a huge baseball kid. Remember that. And remember that as we talk about Deuce Robinson's career. Now, I don't like, again, how the Dylan Raiola camp is handling this. He's transferred from school to school to school, okay? And Chandler's no slouch, and yet now he's transferring again to Pinnacle after transferring to Chandler. He seems to have some sort of attitude to him, and I'm not sure if I would like that in my program. Now, Nebraska, that's the bloodlines. His dad, Dominic Raiola. His uncle, Donovan Raiola, is a coach there, but his dad was a center there, a great center there. So I definitely, if I had to make my prediction right now on where he's going to go, I'm going to slightly lean towards Nebraska. But with that being said, I mean, this is completely up in the air, and you just don't know what the Raiola camp is thinking whatsoever. I want to talk about defensive lineman David Stone. Now, David Stone is a very versatile defensive lineman. He can play off the edge, but he's probably going to project more into the interior when he puts on weight and his body develops. He's between Michigan State and Oklahoma. Now, this would be a massive get for a defensive program that struggled on both sides recently. I mean, Oklahoma's had their struggles. Mel Tucker, ever since he got to Michigan State, has definitely had his. But Michigan State is not going to get this kid from Bradenton, from IMG Academy, okay? Because everybody at IMG, I guarantee it, is going to be advising against it. It's not like it's a great elite school if things go south for the kid, God forbid, or life after football. It's not like Michigan State is an elite school. It's probably the least elite school in the entire Big Ten, but neither is Oklahoma, right? The difference is, though, it's a little bit easier of a place to succeed on and off the football field at Oklahoma because there's a lot more connections at Oklahoma. There's nothing else in that state. And I got to think that he's going, plus thugs. He's going to end up at Oklahoma, the 5-star defensive lineman. And let's just look at the work that Brent Venables is putting in. You got 2 defensive linemen. We just talked about one in David Stone, but you also have Williams Nwaneri, something like that. I don't know. Nwaneri. Let's say Nwaneri. He's a defensive lineman from Missouri. He's going to be an Oklahoma commit when it's all said and done. On the offensive side, they're going to get Bryant Wesco, another 5-star kid, the number 3 wide receiver, only behind Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Wingo, who's projected to go to Tennessee. Sammy Brown's another story. I'll talk about that at a later episode. The linebacker, Sammy Brown out of Georgia. But Bryant Wesco is projected to go there for Oklahoma. What he's doing in the recruiting trail is really, really good. And it's just, I feel like you got to give him a little bit more time. I feel like they're going to improve a lot this upcoming season. And they're going to be in many more battles to come. I mean, there's a lot of kids who are not quite sure where they're going to go. A lot of kids from Texas, a lot of kids from Louisiana who are going to consider Oklahoma. A kid like Dominic McKinley is another defensive lineman that they're really going to push for if they swing and miss on one of their top 2. Another, kid that they could really, really get involved with is a guy like, Brandon Baker, who's a national recruit at tackle, and, everybody's after him. Maybe they get involved with him. It'll be very interesting to see how this cycle ends up for Oklahoma as a whole, but they have a little bit of quiet momentum, right? They have momentum within the facility, momentum within recruits that they are talking to, and specifically trying to get that D-line solidified and have that be a dominant part of their team. Because after all, we all know that Brent Venables' teams always run through that defensive line. So it'll be interesting to see. Sammy Brown, by the way, is another guy that Oklahoma is in on. I feel like that is going to be an open battle that we need to talk about a little bit later with Sammy Brown and a couple of others. Georgia is a wild place. I mean, you're talking about Aaron Nolan and what happened. I know this was a little bit quieter and under the radar, but Jake Merklinger, who just committed to Tennessee. And you're also talking about this kid, Sammy Brown, who's an absolute elite linebacker in this class. I mean, he's by far my favorite and the best linebacker in this class. He's got great film. He plays high competition, and everybody's after him. Georgia, Clemson, Tennessee, probably one of those three will get him, but Ohio State, Oklahoma, they're working their way in there with him as well. But with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And you guys, make sure you like and subscribe. Check out Loudmouth CFB Sundays at noon, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. That's on Loudmouth Sports. Of course, how you spell it is in the bio, but I shouldn't really have to tell you how to spell it. Loudmouth Weekly was just last week. Check out my man, Tyler Isley, LSN. That's how you say it. Spell it is Tyler, basic Tyler, and then Isley is Icely, and then LSN, just like the LSN on my channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We'll see you guys next time.